Valuable, especially on a Tuesday evening. But want to thank you all for joining me tonight for this webinar where I will be discussing the Mediterranean diet for fertility. Is it worth the hype? I am Dara Godfrey. I am a registered dietitian and I work at Reproductive Medicine Associates of New York. I have been working at this clinic for over 14 years. And as some of you may know, I started out as a patient at the clinic and really have such a passion for the people working there. And now I'm so grateful to be on the other side, helping patients out. And I'm also a co-host for a podcast that's affiliated with RMA. It's called Fertility Forward, and I love hosting next to my dear colleague and friend, Rena Gower. So please check that out if you would like more guidance and more tips and more insights into the world of fertility. And before I get started, a shout out to RMA, a phenomenal clinic that's been in business for almost 24 years now. We have over 20 reproductive endocrinologists and fertility experts and reproductive urologists. We're very fortunate to also have a great genetics team supporting our patients, as well as a really robust mental health team. Alongside myself and another registered dietitian based in Westchester, we also have a psychologist and a licensed clinical social worker. And we have so many offices across the New York metropolitan area, including 4 state-of-the-art IVF labs. So a really great clinic, and so proud to be working with them. So now let's dive right in. The Mediterranean diet. I think it's so important to start with some history. I'm sure it's a hot topic. It's something that many people have heard of as one of the big diets out there. But where did it all begin? It was actually first recognized as a healthy dietary pattern way back in the 1960s, when there was research done by this gentleman named Ansel Keys. And he was really trying to understand the relationship between dietary patterns and the rise of heart disease that was really being seen back in the 1950s. And to do this, Ansel surveyed the dietary intake of people from many countries, although his report ended up highlighting the findings from 7 countries. And that's why the study was called the 7-country study. And this included Yugoslavia, Italy, Greece, and specifically parts of Crete and Corfu in Greece, Finland, Holland, Japan, and the US. And he presented his findings. And what he found was that with this lower fat intake diet, especially in saturated fat, these people ended up having lower rates of heart disease. And from this study, this was like the first definition ended up coming about. And now when we actually look at the Mediterranean diet, we've actually kind of compressed it, and we're primarily referring to the dietary patterns of 2 countries, Italy and Greece, but more specifically, southern Italy, and also specifically Crete in Greece. And this is back in the time periods of the 1950s and 60s. And his predecessor was Walter Willett, and he's very big in the nutrition world, and he brought this diet or dietary pattern back to America. And he kind of elaborated on this definition of the Mediterranean diet to, I love that he called it a food pattern typical of the regions of Greece and Italy, where life expectancy was notably high, while rates of related chronic diseases, specifically heart disease, was very low. What I love is I actually dug a little deeper, and the term diet actually comes from Greece, and it actually means a way of life. And I absolutely love that, because I think in this day and age, we actually look at diet as something very connected to something very temporary, something very restrictive. But actually, diet means a way of life. And I wanted to delve a little bit deeper So Walter Willett brought this terminology and these ideas to America and abroad. And he, decades later, presented at a conference in Cambridge in 1993. And he kind of expanded on this definition. And he showed this great graphic, this pyramid that he termed the Mediterranean Diet Pyramid. And this was in partnership with the World Health Organization, Old Ways, and he still works to this day at the Harvard School of Public Health. And this was a healthier alternative to the USDA's original food pyramid. And what I love with this pyramid is you can see down below, there's this component that you don't always see in a food pyramid. And this is the component of the social aspect, the lifestyle. So it's not just about what we're eating, but also the social connection, the physical activity component, which is, I think, pretty incredible. But let's delve deeper into specifically what constitutes the Mediterranean diet. And even though way back when Ansel Keys kind of said it was a low-fat diet, the modern definition actually does include some more fats. But it's really a plant-based diet. It offers a wide diversity of foods, but it really hones in on whole foods. So your fruits, your vegetables, really focusing on whole grains. And in terms of fat, the fats come predominantly from olive oil, from nuts and seeds, and a lot of the protein sources predominantly come from legumes, and also a little bit from a moderate in fish and seafood, a little bit in poultry, somewhat moderate in dairy, but specifically in terms of yogurt and some cheeses, a little bit of eggs, but little to no red meat, little to no sweets or sugary drinks or butter. And what a lot of people really like about this diet is moderate amounts of red wine are okay. Not something to start drinking if you're not a drinker, but if it's something that's already part of your routine, red wine is part of this dietary pattern. So you see whole foods, healthy fats, minimally processed foods. And let's compare that to the Western diet, or another way that we refer to it as the standard American diet, which is very sad. And this is the currently found in developed countries, including America, and it's based on convenience foods and very highly processed foods. And it's characterized by the consumption of these processed red meats, desserts and sweets, fried foods, high-fat dairy products, lots of more processed refined grains, so the white flour, the white breads. So it's many ways the inverse of the Mediterranean diet. It's very low on, the fruits and the vegetables, and quite high on the more processed packaged foods. These foods are also quite high in calories, high in the more unhealthy fats, including trans fats, which are found in like those baked goods, the donuts, your fried foods, your French fries, your chips, and also somewhat higher in saturated fat coming from meats and high-fat meats and dairy products. And many of these foods, not all, but many of these foods are very low in vitamins and minerals, and fiber. And overall, it's been linked to disease and a myriad of health issues. So inflammation, cancer, heart disease, which has been shown in a lot of research to negatively impact fertility in both men and women. So the complete opposite of the Mediterranean diet on most fronts. So now let's get back to the Mediterranean diet. As I mentioned, the diet is typically built around plant-based foods, and there's a lot of nutritional benefits. Some of the main areas that I really think are strong reasons why this can be a great dietary pattern is that it's super rich in fiber, coming from the whole grains, coming from your fruits and vegetables, which can keep your GI tract really healthy. It's also a diet that's rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which is the best source of polyunsaturated fats. That's coming from your fatty fishes. It's also rich in unsaturated fats coming from monounsaturated fats. This is your olive oil, your nuts and seeds, your olives. It does focus a lot more, as I mentioned, on plant-based proteins. So that would be your legumes, so your beans and your lentils, and things of that nature. But what I really love specifically, there's a couple of things. What I really love about this eating pattern is that it's non-restrictive. It's very different than your average diet, which is really focused on calories and restrictions and when not to eat. This really focuses on whole foods, foods that our ancestors ate. It's also potentially beneficial for blood sugar control and for helping with insulin resistance, or those people who have insulin resistance. What I love is because it's high in fiber and healthy fats, it really can help with satiety, keeps us feeling fuller a lot longer than a lot of these processed foods, which have very poor quality components in it that actually raise our blood sugar levels and don't fill us up for a long period of time. And really what I love about this meal pattern is that it encourages this community sense, this idea that it's not just about the food, but it's about who we surround ourselves with while we're eating, while we're active on our day-to-day. And that's something, again, you don't see very frequently in any other type of dietary pattern. And also want to note back to the fat. Fat isn't demonized in this diet. I think fat gets a bad rap, but it is a macronutrient that is necessary, but it hones in on the quality of the fat that we're going for. And then rather than a single food, it really emphasizes a dietary pattern. So it's for the most part quite an inclusive dietary pattern, which is great. And there's many benefits aside from fertility, which we can speak to a little bit later, but I really want to hone in on how the Mediterranean diet overall, research is pretty great showing that it can be helpful for cardiovascular disease, reducing coronary artery disease, helping improve that good HDL cholesterol and reducing systolic blood pressure. It has a lot of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant benefits and properties, which can be helpful for your overall health, but also can be really important to help lower your risk of a variety of cancers. A lot of the research that I've seen has been great for people with breast cancer. And what I love about the Mediterranean diet is it's great for metabolic health. And I speak to my patients a lot about that to support healthy blood sugars, helping to lower your risk of metabolic syndrome, may help improve insulin sensitivity, and overall help decrease one's risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It also has the potential to help lower the risk of obesity and help with weight loss management. And especially those fats and the fiber can be very helpful in this. The microbiome is definitely a hot topic nowadays. And there's research now showing that this eating pattern can help support your gut microbiome and help keep your GI tract and your digestive tract really, really healthy. Fascinating that there's research now with the Mediterranean diet and skin health, and it goes back to the antioxidant-rich fruits and vegetables can have a potential anti-inflammatory effect. The nuts, seeds, olive oils also can contribute to healthy skin. Probably my favorite, and where I feel like there's a lot of research that I've been seeing lately, is on the benefit of this diet for mental health in terms of not just improving mood, but also really trying to help decrease or reduce one's risk of depression. So I think that we're going to see a lot of research, even more research, showing how it can be helpful for our mental health. And on top of that, kind of in lieu of that, also in combination, helping slow the decline of our brain function. So can help with longevity, keep us aging, so longevity, living longer, but not just living longer and healthier. And again, this can come back probably part of the reason can be the component with the healthy fats, but I also wonder if it has to do with the community aspect of it as well. And then last but not least, why you're all here today is to learn some of the potential connections or benefits of the Mediterranean diet for fertility. I wish I could say there was a lot of great research, but the research in this area is still one where I think there's a lot lacking. But let's dive in. Let's see some of the best research out there and the potential benefits of this eating pattern towards your fertility. So these first three studies were done abroad, so not in the US. For those of you who are in America, they're all done abroad, and they're all observational studies. The first one is done in Greece, and they looked at women before their first IVF treatment. And this study was designed to evaluate the influence of habitual dietary intake and lifestyle on fertility outcomes. And they looked at a number of outcomes, including oocyte yield, fertilization rate, embryo quality, as well as the clinical endpoints of pregnancy and live birth. And they did this by giving people a food frequency questionnaire and then putting them in either three different categories: low adherence to the diet, middle adherence to this diet, or a high adherence to this diet. And what they found was people who were in the highest section, in the highest group, had higher rates of clinical pregnancy and live birth, which is great. Unfortunately, they did not find an association with the first outcomes, the oocyte yields, fertilization rate, and embryo quality, or with implantation. So great, but not great on all fronts. The second study was done in China, also looking at women with infertility who came to a clinic prior to their fertility treatments. And I wanted to know, with this research on this first page, it happened to be in groups of women who were had a certain body mass index. And so all of them you can see were non-obese patients. And similarly, they looked at this score, Mediterranean score, but Mediterranean diet score, and they put them into two different categories instead of three. In this study, they actually found higher embryo yield with people who had higher Mediterranean diet scores. However, kind of opposite with the study prior, the pregnancy rates were similar. And then with this last study, which was done in the Netherlands, looked at couples undergoing IVF and ICSI treatment, but particularly honed in on just the women and looked at their food frequency questionnaires, put them into two groups, just like the China study. Similar to the first one, they found higher pregnancy rates in those women with higher patterns. And interestingly enough, with this study, they actually looked at a variety of healthy diets. And of all the healthy diets, this is the one that showed the highest pregnancy rates. So that's quite promising. Now, the research here in the US, Gaskins and his group based in Harvard have done the most research in this area. And they also looked at women before IVF treatment. But interestingly enough, their patient population was predominantly white. So not necessarily reflective of, all of America, also somewhat limited on body mass index. And similar to the study before, they looked at other diets and they compared them based on this Mediterranean score. And they found higher probability of live births, specifically with a more Mediterranean diet. But it's interesting to note that when they, assess the Mediterranean diet, every single study is a little bit skewed in terms of what they dictate as part of the Mediterranean diet. So some of them may skew more higher in fats, some may be lower in fats, some of them may be more open to more fish and less fish. So they're all a little bit different. I wish I would see a little bit more consistency in how they evaluate and assess this diet. But that's a side note. And the last two studies, the second to last study was done in Italy, and this was for PCOS patients who were obese. So not necessarily getting a fertility treatment, but considering fertility treatment, and they ended up doing this questionnaire, this food frequency questionnaire. And this is, I found really interesting and really beneficial, was they found that people with who adhered more to this Mediterranean type of diet had lower clinical severity of the disease. What does that mean? Reduced inflammation and insulin resistance compared to those who did not adhere to a Mediterranean diet. So that is really promising to know that it can help with a lot of the manifestations of PCOS, which can ultimately potentially help with ovulation and potentially with fertility. I think this is really promising research. I'm really happy to see. And excuse me, for the last one I wanted to show you, this is just one highlight, but there's a lot more research actually done on men to show the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. This was done in Greece, looked at men from couples attending this clinic, and what they found was those people who had the highest Mediterranean diet score ended up having the best outcomes in terms of their sperm quality, concentration, so quality, quantity, and motility compared to those who had the lowest amounts. So really for men, changing their diet can really improve sperm quality and quantity and those parameters. It didn't necessarily lead to them, I don't think they even looked at afterwards, did that necessarily lead to better fertility outcomes in the end? That's still to be seen. But again, all of these studies are observational studies, which are not the gold standard of research. And where I have a hard time in terms of research is that they're all using food frequency questionnaires. And so you're asking someone what they're eating yesterday or the day before, and there's often a margin of error of people reporting, often over-reporting perhaps some of the healthier components, sometimes underreporting some of the less nutritious components, perhaps. The fact that it was done predominantly with people who were of normal weight or overweight, but not necessarily obese populations. Again, it's only giving a snapshot of people. And also, I wish I saw more research done in America. So, when it comes to fertility related outcomes, the jury is still not out in relation to the research that we're seeing. That doesn't mean that it's not a nutritious diet and that there can be a lot of benefit. But I really do think we need to be seeing a lot more research being done, especially in America. And also trying to discover what are the mechanisms that are actually helping. What's the diet? What's the part of the diet that's really helping people have better outcomes? We're not quite sure. We think for sure the antioxidant component can be a big reason. Foods that are rich in vitamins and minerals, fruits and vegetables are antioxidant rich, can decrease oxidative stress, decrease inflammation. Fiber as well may be a component to this diet that can be really supportive of one's health. Added folate or vitamin B12, vitamin B6 are some other components that may be associated with better outcomes. But I really think it's the synergistic effect. I actually, and also the activity component and the social component. So I think there's really a synergistic effect of this overall dietary pattern rather than these isolated components that contribute to reproductive health benefits. Let me see if I can get to my next slide. So I like to play devil's advocate. And research aside, there's so many great components of the Mediterranean diet. What I still find a little confusing is there's no universal definition of this diet. It's quite non-specific, which can work to its benefit. It's kind of much more of a broad definition. But again, some people view it as higher in dairy and eggs, and some people don't. Protein also is focused, but it's much more plant-based. And I don't want to demonize animal protein. I think animal protein coming from good quality sources, your grass-fed beef, your pasture-raised hormone-free chicken and eggs, your organic dairy products are great sources of protein that can, has been shown to be helpful with ovulation and hormonal balance. So that's where I think it's somewhat limited. And then for some population groups, it may be too heavily focused on carbohydrates. I love that it emphasizes whole grains. You know, in America, I think a lot of us eat our white rice and our French fries and our mashed potatoes, and this really focuses on the whole grains. But it may lean too heavy towards the grains and the beans, specifically for some population groups who may have blood sugar issues, maybe insulin resistant. So that may be one area that's falling a little bit short. And it also doesn't focus on serving sizes. That's what I love, is that it's non-restrictive, but some people need that guidance and support of how much of each component really should be on that plate. And again, research is still somewhat limited. And I didn't even show, but there are some research out there that shows that there's no benefit at all. So again, the jury's still out from research. However, there is still so many good components from this way of eating or way of life. And I really want to, let people know that all you need is some small changes that you can start with today to really try to incorporate some of these Mediterranean approaches onto your plate. And how do you start? Focusing on whole foods over processed foods. If you typically have chips as a snack, swapping it for hummus and some veggies. If you are, buying foods that are fresh and in season. So instead of, in this day today, and it's fall, instead of buying watermelon, which is somewhat out of season, or a lot of those berries, really trying to go for something that's in season. So plums and pears and apples. I think really trying to hone in on better quality carbohydrates coming from whole grains and whole grain breads is wonderful. Being open-minded to trying, instead of your average white rice, trying wild rice or quinoa or millet or farro. And also expanding in terms of beans. There's so many beans out there. People often think of just black beans and white beans, but there's kidney beans and there are gigante beans that are very big in Greece, and lentils. So there's a lot of variation that way. And also fish. I think fish is something that I often recommend to my patients. And we often think of the fatty fish being the salmon, but also trout and sardines and herring. A lot of those canned fish can be great too. And just, I love the approach of eating as a way of life. It's a diet, it's a way of life. So there's so many things that you can do to really change your current eating habits and make it less Western and sad and more Mediterranean in feel. But I do think it's really important to make sure to consult with a healthcare provider, specifically a registered dietitian, as we can really help guide and support you in creating a more personalized approach that's really tailored to you. So if someone does have PCOS, if someone is coming in for weight support or other issues, we can really tailor this type of eating plan to really suit your specific needs. But really, the Mediterranean diet can support your overall health, your mental health, your skin, help you fight disease, and also possibly help support your reproductive health. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my presentation. I'm going to stop my slides, and now I'm going to see if there are any questions that you may have. So please feel free if there's any questions now. I'll stay on for the next 5 or 10 minutes in case you have anything that I could help you with. And anything that I can't help you with today, feel free to go on to RMA's website and you can find my information and contact me that way as well. So as of now, I don't see any questions, but again, I'll wait for another minute or two. Please, in the Q&A section, if you have any questions, I will. Oh, good. So the first question I received is, what is my opinion on dairy? So that's fine that you arrived late. I did mention that the Mediterranean diet, there's different viewpoints. The original definition of the Mediterranean diet was quite limited in dairy products, but it did include a little bit of yogurt and a little bit of cheese. My viewpoint with regards to dairy is it really should be personalized. But again, I don't think it needs to be demonized. I do think it's about the quality of the dairy products that are on the market now and going for better quality dairy products coming from grass-fed animals. If you have GI issues, going for alternatives like goats or sheep's milk, which is much easier on your digestive tract. But I really do feel like whole dairy, and this is where, again, there's different viewpoints on dairy in the Mediterranean diet. You know, people in Greece are not eating fat-free yogurt. They're not having fat-free cheese. They're having full-fat dairy. And, you know, the limited research, but the research that has been done with regards to dairy and fertility shows a positive benefit with higher fat dairy. So I do suggest for my female patients, for their hormone balance, to, you know, if they're choosing dairy products, to go for grass-fed, hormone-free, whole milk dairy products. It's a great source of protein. You know, if you're going for your Greek yogurt or you're going for some of those harder cheeses, like I mean, feta's not so hard, but somewhat harder. Feta or Parmesan cheeses are a great addition. Okay, the next question, not really related to the Mediterranean diet, but I could still bring it up. Is gluten okay to have in your diet? So there's a lot of controversy when it comes to gluten, and similar to dairy, it's not something that should necessarily be demonized. Although I do feel like the gluten in America doesn't necessarily sit well with everyone, and it really depends for some people, and this goes for dairy too. For some people with certain conditions, especially with autoimmune conditions, often report feeling a lot better when they are off dairy and are gluten-free. But for me, it's the quality of the food item. So you can go gluten-free and get a gluten-free piece of bread, but that doesn't necessarily make it a healthier product. Actually, a lot of the gluten-free products on the market now are much higher in sugar and much higher in processed foods. So again, depending on the person, depending how you process and how you feel after you eat foods with gluten, it can definitely be a part of your diet. But if you are going for gluten, like foods that include gluten, I would still suggest going for the less processed, you know, going for a bran, or going for a whole wheat bread, as opposed to something that is, you know, coming from white flour or something much more processed. Another question here. What foods would you recommend eating before egg retrieval? This could be a whole nother topic, but you could see kind of what I mentioned, whole foods, fruits, vegetable, whole grains, but I really do want to add that added benefit of protein, and protein can come from a variety of sources, whether it's animal or plant-based, but I do think really trying to prioritize protein because it really is essential for every cell in your body. And I notice that a lot of my female patients are not getting enough protein. Staying hydrated, and then there's other things less nutritionally, you know, non-nutritional that are key elements, you know, in terms of trying to minimize environmental toxins, prioritizing sleep, prioritizing your mental health, so many things aside from nutrition, but when in doubt, whole foods, the foods that our ancestors ate. What are my thoughts on eating pork or burgers in the beginning of IVF? I don't think pork necessarily needs to be something that's demonized. I'm more concerned about is the processed meats. So a lot of these deli meats, a lot of the sausages and the bacon, are not great for your overall health and have been linked to a myriad of issues, of health issues, diseases, cancers, heart disease, and you know, research on fertility and processed meats. You know, it's a pretty clear link to poor fertility outcomes. But you know, better quality pork, pasture raised, you know, you're getting not, I guess, you know, having the pigs be roam free is a much better option than, again, these processed meats that we're getting nowadays. I'm going to answer a couple more. So grams of protein a day recommended. Again, this is a little bit more individualized, and different people have different thoughts and opinions. General rule of thumb is 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. So whatever your weight is, you divide it by 2.2. So whatever your weight is in pounds, you divide it in 2.2, and that will be your weight in kilograms. And that is approximately how many grams you need. So if someone is 50, 50 kilograms, they require about 50 grams a day. And that's best divided in 3 meals or more. Again, this is a great question. You mentioned some of your female patients don't get enough protein. How do you know if you're getting enough? That's why meeting with a dietitian is so important. A lot of times we don't necessarily know if we are. I think a great place to start is to make sure that you get a source of protein at every meal. So for breakfast, I see so many people having cereal with almond milk. Almonds have some protein, but the almond milk is very low in protein, so you're not going to get much protein that way. But adding in yogurt, nuts and seeds in the morning, eggs, great way of getting in protein. And then for lunch and dinner, trying to make 25% of your plate consist of protein is a great place to start. But again, meeting with a dietitian to really hone in and make sure that you're getting enough protein is probably what I would recommend. What would a typical breakfast, lunch, and snack be? For those of you who are still on, I could answer this. Again, I like to personalize it because what one person likes, another person may say yuck. So again, when I'm working with someone, I like to get a baseline of what they're currently eating and then try to work within their likes before I make suggestions. But again, a typical breakfast that I would recommend would include a source of protein and a fiber. So protein can come from the yogurt, some dairy, it can come from eggs, it can come from nuts, seeds, nut butter, and then some form of fiber coming from a whole grain, a bran, oats, flax, chia, or even some fruits are really high in fiber, like raspberries or blackberries. And in terms of a lunch and a dinner, components, you want to see a protein, lots of vegetables, like half of your plate consisting of vegetables and a whole grain. So lunch and dinner can be similar. And again, depending on why someone's coming to see me, that may be modified a little bit. And then snack time is another great opportunity to get in a little extra protein, a string cheese, a hard-boiled egg or two, some yogurt, a handful of nuts, a scoop of almond butter, some, again, I'm not a big fan of deli meats, but on occasion going for a better quality, turkey wrapped with some veggies and some mustard can be another option. But even beans would be a nice, a handful of beans and some cut up peppers. So there's many ways to get in your protein, your vegetables, your whole grains. And I didn't even mention healthy fats, like adding some olive oil, adding some avocado to your meals. Fats should not be something to be feared, but something to add can really be helpful for ovulation. If you don't eat dairy or eggs, what can be eaten for breakfast? Nuts, seeds, or nut butter are other alternatives for protein. Just be careful again. The nut milks and the oat milks are really devoid of protein. And then sometimes for some people, some population groups, I will suggest a protein powder, but it's not whole foods. It's a lot more processed. So you want to be somewhat, a little bit wary of going for those packaged foods. So hopefully I answered most of, avocado, last one. The last one is avocado oil. Great. I didn't mention it because it's not, it's more common nowadays, but it's not something we saw way back when. But my favorite oils that I suggest cooking with or using for salad dressings, which you should be making your own salad dressing as opposed to going for a lot of the commercial dressings, which have unhealthy oils like soybean oil or corn oil or canola oil. Avocado oil and extra virgin olive oil are phenomenal. So thank you. I appreciate it. Great questions, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen in. And please tune in next month when I'll be speaking about vegetarianism and veganism. So have a wonderful night, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Good night.